Here is going to go over how to make the graph for the Newton's second law lab in Logger Pro. So the first thing that you should do is you should input your data. So here's just some data points that I made up. Notice that on the x-axis I put the acceleration values, and for this y section here I put the force values. The first thing that we want to do is then label these different axes. So how we do that is we go into the data set and then we're going to double click. So on the x-axis, we put the acceleration. So I'm going to type in acceleration for name. The variable for acceleration is a lowercase a, and the units are meters per second squared. Alrighty. And notice how then acceleration then comes up on the x-axis. So we now have a label there. That's good. Now let's look at the y-axis. So we know that force is on the y-axis, a capital F is the variable for force, and the newtons is the unit. Perfect, so now we have force labeled. All good things. Next, we want to make sure that the graph covers the entire, or the data points cover the entire graph. So as you can see here, my last point is here, and really we want it to be all the way over here. So what we do is we look at the data for that last point. And this last point is at the point 6, 9. So what I'm going to do is I want my x-axis to maybe go a little bit further than 6. So I'm going to double click somewhere on the graph and I get this box. So my x-axis should go from 0 to a little bit further than my last point. So I'm going to put 6.2. All right. And my y-axis is going to go from 0 to a little bit over that last point. That last point was 9, so I'm going to put this as 9.2. And so obviously these different ranges will be different for you, but this is how your graph should look. Essentially the data will fill the entire graph. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is let's change our data points to make them a little bit easier to see. So you want to try to click on the middle of one of your data points, and then you can go to options. And then instead of point symbols for being an empty circle, let's make it a filled circle. So now you can see we have these nice filled in red circles. All right, this graph is missing a title, so let's put in a title. If you double click somewhere on the graph and then go to graph options, you have this area that you can type in a title, and usually our title is whatever's on the y-axis versus whatever on the x-axis. So our y-axis is force versus our x-axis, which is acceleration. Perfect. Now our graph has a title. The last thing that I asked you guys to do is a linear fit. So if you go up here and you click on the linear fit button, it fits a line to your entire data. And as we talked about in class, we know that the slope is going to equal the mass of the object that we were analyzing. So here, the slope should equal the mass of the cart. So my data suggests that my cart weighed 1.5 kilograms, okay, which is probably a lot more than your data, which is totally fine.